from the candidates tournament today, and we'll just jump right in. And immediately, the first thing that we need to cover is Maxime Vachier-Lagrave beating Ding Liren. So that means Ding Liren is currently 0 for 2 in this tournament. MVL, the late add-on after Timur Rajabov withdrew, so this was very great for MVL for his chances. And even though it's only round 2, I feel like I can almost say that this torpedoes Ding's chances at winning the tournament or even finishing within the top half. It's really just a disastrous start for Ding thus far. So let's get into this game here. We have e4 from MVL, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. We get a Ruy Lopez. Obviously, this has all been played many, many times. And now MVL can play c3 here in this position, but d5, the martial attack could commence, and probably not something Maxime wants to go for, given that Ding does have experience playing the black side of the martial attack. So Maxime opts for h3, bishop b7, and d3, just securing the center here. And we have d6, all very standard theory, a3, queen to d7, all of this has been played a lot, knight c3, rook f to e8, bishop to d2. Now, bishop to d2 is a rarer move, and undoubtedly part of his preparation for the candidates. Knight to d8, still operating within the realm of theory here, and knight d5. And this seems to be what Maxime has prepared. Knight to d5 has not been played by some very high-rated players. So it's safe to call this a novelty for higher level chess, although it's not technically a novelty overall. So Ding decides to capture it, knight captures, e captures, and c5. Now, here's the novelty, and c6 had been played before, and it's perfectly reasonable. The reason that Ding decides to break with c5 instead of c6 is Ding wants to be able to repair f5 coming up and maybe start an attack on the king side here, as that's where his pawn chain is pointing, so that's where his play should be. So Ding plays c5. The problem is if Ding ventures for f5 immediately, it doesn't work because Maxime has a nice tactic. Knight captures e5, d captures e5, and d6 check. You get this discovered check from the bishop, and Maxime will pick up the bishop on e7. He'll enjoy the bishop pair. He'll be up a pawn. So f5 was not possible for Ding, so he decided to go for c5 instead. a4 by Maxime, and f5. And now the line is slightly different for Maxime. Capturing on e5 is a lot less clear-cut here because you still get this check-in, but now because Ding had played c5, he now has c4, so to pressure this bishop, after d captures on c4, bishop f6, and let's say a captures, takes with check, king h8, bishop to b4, securing this pawn. And this looks on the surface fairly good for Maxime, but Ding will also be able to achieve his goal of pushing on the king side relatively soon. And Ding cannot capture this pawn immediately because of d7, and Maxime will win the exchange. But this is, in a sense, superior for Ding than the game continuation because he can pile up on the long diagonal toward the king side. He'll be able to play g5. So even though Ding is at a, I guess you could call it a material deficit because of these pawns, Ding has the knight for the 3 pawns, but it's obviously far superior for Ding than the game continuation. So back to the game, Maxime played a captures b5, Ding recaptures, rook takes a8, bishop takes a8, and now a great move for Maxime here, c4. Now he's striking at the queen side. This is where Maxime is likely to find his play, and he makes Great move, and B captures on c4 is suicide here for Ding because of bishop a4, and Maxime wins material, so that's obviously not an option. So knight f7 from Ding, and Maxime captures. And again, because of this bishop a4 tactic, Ding can't really take back on b5, so there's the beauty behind the c4 move by Maxime. Ding can't touch it now or the next move, because again, if he grabs it with queen captures b5, there's bishop a4, and Maxime is going to pick up the rook on e8, so not an option for Ding. So instead, he goes for g5, and he immediately starts kingside operations. The only problem is Maxime has now one material on b5, and if Ding's attack cannot pay off, then it's very likely that Maxime can convert this game. So knight h2, stepping out of the way of g4, and now g4 is impossible for Ding, because after g4, h captures, f captures, queen captures, knight captures. Maxime is going to be up 2 pawns, and Ding will not have an attack. This light-squared bishop is a very, very bad piece here, just staring into granite on d5. So this would be totally winning for Maxime. So Ding obviously does not go for this. He plays king to g7. And this is very interesting. Ding ends up playing king to g6 on the next move and hoping to push more, but pushing your king up the board, especially with this setup on the board, is risky at best for Ding, and it ends up coming back to bite him. So bishop to c4 secures this pawn moving forward, and also prepares b4 for Maxime so that he can get queenside play later, and it's always nice to have a protected passed pawn on the outside. So king to g6, like we said, Ding wants to be able to play h5, but he never gets to play it because Maxime strikes first with g4. And taking this for Ding can really in no way lead to a favorable position for him, because this bishop is still hitting granite on d5. This queen really doesn't have anywhere to go. This bishop, rook, and knight are also stuck. And there's also the fact that you have your king on g6. All in all, this would be a much better position for Maxime, and he should not have trouble converting this into a win. So after g4, Ding instead goes knight h6, and Maxime just keeps piling up queen f3. Playing f4 here by Ding to shut things down, runs into queen e4, and Ding's position kind of gets exposed. The king probably has to drop back, and the attack will continue with h4. And now suddenly it's Maxime who's the one attacking on the king side here, and it's not going to end well for black. So after queen to f3, he plays bishop to d8, kind of the move I guess he had to find, so he's thinking about maybe transferring the bishop over to the queen side here. Queen back to g2, eyeing this nice juicy target of a pawn on the f-file, and now best here for Ding would be to play bishop to b7. But this still runs into g captures on f5, and queen captures on f5 loses beautifully to f4. You can't not capture this way because the pawn is pinned. You cannot capture this way because the pawn is pinned again to the king. And obviously capturing with the queen runs into bishop captures on f4. So Ding would probably have to do something like bishop to c8, f captures g5, knight f7, and h4. And again, you still have your king on g6, and again, it's now white who's attacking on the king side, and Ding should not be able to hold this. So g captures f5, Ding would have to find knight captures on f5, but the position would still be very difficult after knight f3, and now Ding really just has to start running with the king g7, h4 to blow open the g-file, king h8, h captures g5. But even this is still going to be superior for Maxime, because Ding has wasted time bringing the king on to g6 and then back all the way to h8, and Maxime is just in a much better position to exploit this. So bishop to b7 followed by knight captures on f5 is likely best for Ding. However, after queen to g2, he plays f4, and this is a mistake because it allows the queen invasions through e4. So First, Maxime plays b4, starts counterplay, bishop to b6. The computer recommends c captures on b4, but that also achieves Maxime's goal of blowing the position open, so this is obviously not going to work. So queen e4 check, king to g7, and now Maxime captures on d5, on c5, sorry. And now if Ding wants to capture after the bishop, he runs into d4, and gets severe problems because Maxime is going to be blowing open more lines if you do nothing. The e-pawn is still pinned to this rook on e8, and if you play bishop captures on d4, you have knight f3, and you fork those two nice things, and it won't be survivable. So Ding instead opts for d captures on c5, but knight f3 all the same, knight f7, bishop to c3, and now Maxime will just ramp up the pressure on this pawn on e5. He now has 4 units attacking it, and things could get grim for Ding pretty soon. Bishop to c7, but a nice deflection tactic with b6 for Maxime. This really isn't even a pawn sacrifice, because if bishop captures on b6, knight captures on e5, wins the material back with interest for Maxime. For example, knight captures, bishop captures, king g8, and now you can even run the same theme here of d6. Discovered check. It does not matter that the queen is under attack because the black king is in check. So king f8, and now a really pretty tactic, bishop to g7 check. If the queen captures, you run into mate on e8. So king captures on g7, queen captures, rook captures on e8, and Ding is again busted. Maxime has a very powerful passed d pawn and is up the exchange. So this would be completely winning for Maxime. So obviously you can't touch it, so Ding goes back, bishop to b8. And now Maxime has a much better position. Stockfish has the position as almost +4 for Maxime because his pieces are very well placed in the position right now, and he has this nice passed d pawn. So he decides to trade queens. Queen f5 takes, king f6, and knight to d2. Now the problem for Ding here is capturing on f5 is really risky, but in some sense, it's not much else for Ding to do. King captures on f5, and Maxime has the option to play bishop to b5, rook e7, and bishop to c6. And the b pawn and d pawn could very easily become very threatening. The rook can get switched over, so this is not very pretty for Ding. So instead, he plays rook to d8, puts his rook behind the d pawn, but that doesn't really end up stopping Maxime. d6, another square vacating sacrifice. And now after rook captures on d6, rook b1, we can see why Maxime played this. Now he's just going for b7 immediately. And there really isn't much to do here. The threat, another threat is knight e4 in the position. So if Ding tries something like bishop to c6, he runs into knight e4. And you either lose the exchange on d6, or you give up your bishop for it, and this pawn starts wreaking havoc on Ding's position. So obviously, really not an option. But then again, Ding has no good options by this point anyway. He ends up playing knight to d8, but Maxime has a excellent tactic to finish off the game here. Ding has covered the b7 square with 2 pieces, but it doesn't matter. Most chess players know the saying, passed pawns must be pushed, and Maxime pushes his with b7. If you capture it with knight captures on b7, you run into knight e4 again, and you lose the exchange, and not really going to be an option for Ding. So instead, bishop captures on b7, but bishop a5. And now, really the simple threat is for Maxime to just capture. So let's say king captures on f5, bishop captures on d8, rook captures d8, rook captures on b7, and this is going to be game over. Maxime is up a piece. Yes, Ding has 2 pawns, but those pawns are fairly useless where they are. And Maxime's pieces just have an insane amount of activity. The knight is coming to e4. And there really is no holding this for Ding. So after bishop a5, If you move this bishop for Ding, you lose the bishop on b8. So again, not an option. And there really is nothing to do here for Ding in this position, so he resigned. And now Ding is 0 for 2 to start the candidates, and that is hardly what anyone envisioned. I'm sure it's not what Ding wanted, but right now his performance rating thus far in the tournament, I know it's early, but it's interesting to make really weird overgeneralizations. Ding's performance rating right now is currently 1965, and that's pretty bad for a guy who's rated 2800. My Chess classical rating is higher than Ding's performance rating in this tournament, which is very interesting. It makes me feel good about my rating, even though it's online. So very, very bad start for Ding in this tournament. But of course, Ding's game is not the only one that happened today. We still have 3 other games to check out. So we're moving back now to Fabiano Caruana versus the wildcard Kirill Alexenko was the other decisive game for today. And we have a nice Nimzo Indian defense, and Fabi already on move 4 unleashes some preparation with f3. Kind of just brute force going for the center with e4. The downside is it does weaken the king's protection somehow, but it still is preparation, and he converted this game brilliantly. d5 by Alexenko, a3. Capturing on c3 is a typical line in the Nimzo, but here bishop to e7 was played. e4 by Fabi takes, c5, and here, if you guys remember the game Firouzja played against Anand in the Tata Steel earlier this year, Firouzja played e5. And, well, that move was okay. Firouzja ended up losing the game, but here Fabi plays d5. E captures on d5. E captures castles. And now he has this very nice pawn center and continues development with bishop to e2. And now 2 games have been played with bishop to d6, which looks very natural for black. But here, rook e8 by Alexenko. So there's our novelty as of move 10. So Fabi, no sweat, continues to play very fast. And Alexenko continues to churn out moves as well. Bishop to g4, castles, knight bd7. And now a very interesting move from Fabi here. Fabi plays d6. And, well, we have to assume that there was a lot of preparation involved in playing this move, which was very difficult to face. If the pawn does not prove tenable on d6 in the long term, we could safely say that Alexenko is better. So it's up to Fabi to show his preparation that he has and prove that this d6 move was worth it. So Alexenko makes the only reasonable move here, bishop to f8. And now Fabi nudges the bishop h3, bishop h5, and knight to b5. Fabi secures the pawn and has the possibility of jumping to c7 in the future. And now Alexenko plays rook e6 to attack the pawn again. This turns out to be inaccurate, and Fabi shows why. Bishop to f4, a6, and Fabi jumps in knight c7. And the rooks are forked. Alexenko does have a way out, rook e4, but again, showing this rook e6 move might have been inaccurate from the young 2700. But bishop back to h2 by Fabi. And now Alexenko moves the other rook and g4. And again, Alexenko has a very tough time deciding what to do. If he plays bishop to g6, which would be what I would play here in this position to avoid sacrificing material, bishop to d3 really puts the rook in a lot of duress, because all of the retreat square, most of the retreat squares are covered for the rook, and rook to e3 gets forced. trades queen d2, rook e4, and g5. And Aleksenko's position really is busted because this rook is a sitting duck on e4. The knight's likely going to get chased back to e8. This knight is still very powerful on c7. So already a very difficult position for Aleksenko, and he decides to sacrifice on g4. Knight captures on g4 is interesting, but Aleksenko goes for bishop captures on g4. And h captures, knight captures, bishop to d3, and again we see why Aleksenko's rook e6 was inaccurate. This rook is still in a very awkward position on the e-file, and Aleksenko finds the only move to avoid sacrificing further material with knight captures on h2. So now after bishop captures, knight captures, queen captures, bishop captures on d6, he is able to relieve some of the pressure, but Fabi has this knight for 3 pawns on the queen side, and he proves over the rest of the game why he's better. Knight to d5, g6, basically forced from Aleksenko because Fabi is going to be coming with queen h3, eyeing ideas. This knight is still potentially vulnerable on d7. So g6, queen h3, Fabi sets a little trap. If Aleksenko begins playing immediately on the queen side with b5, it ends up being a major blunder because of the nice tactic. Queen captures on d7, and now if Aleksenko captures back, knight f6 check, and even if Aleksenko tries to capture the knight, it's not going to work. The knight's going to escape through b6 and is going to come back to d5, and Aleksenko is busted because now he's down 2 pieces, and this is really just going to be untenable from a long-term standpoint. So to avoid this, Aleksenko plays king to g7, and Fabi had a really brilliant win here after bishop f5. Which would be a lot for someone to ask, particularly seeing king f2 as the follow-up move. But I'll show you this engine line here. G captures f5, king f2, clears the g file for the rook, and there really is not much to do with this attack. Knight e5, trade some pieces, but you still get rook to g1, king h8, rook h1, and Aleksenko is forced to go queen g8, and now you get knight e7, and Aleksenko is forced to lose material, so he goes. So queen g3 would be the move here. Queen captures, bishop captures, king captures, and now Aleksenko will be able to move the rook, but Fabi will be able to capture on f5, and this really is not going to be tenable again for Aleksenko because again you have knight to d6 as a threat. You could even walk the king up the position for Fabi. So again, bishop to f5 being the very brilliant move here for Fabi, but it might be a bit much to ask for a super grandmaster. I know it would be way too much to ask for me and 99% of the chess laymen out there. So after king to g7, Fabi finds a different way to get his rook to the h-file, king h1. Again, bishop f5 would have been winning on the spot, but so knight e5. And now Fabi, not interested in trading, goes knight h4. And this attack that Fabi has, he'll be bringing the rook to either f1 or g1, and the attack will commence for Fabi. h5 was played by Aleksenko to maybe try to get outpost for his knight here at g4, but Fabi shows why this does not work. Rook g1, and Aleksenko really doesn't have a move. Knight f5 is coming, and Aleksenko's position risks falling apart fast. So he plays bishop to f8, but this allows Fabi a nice forced win here. Knight f4, threatening to sacrifice on h5, even though it's not really a sacrifice because this pawn is pinned. So knight g4, but Fabi is not dissuaded, goes right for it. Knight captures on h5, and the attack immediately becomes crushing. Aleksenko's king has nowhere to go. Again, this is why bishop f8 might have been unwise, because the king might have been able to run given something, I guess, but G captures f5, bishop to f5 now, hits the rook and also prepares to trade off on g4, which would basically be a death sentence for Aleksenko. So bishop to e7 was played, trying to make some threat, I guess, but bishop captures on g4, and Aleksenko really doesn't have a better move than to capture back, but this allows queen captures, bishop g5, queen h5, and you're likely gonna lose this piece because after f6 you're gonna have knight f5 check, and this king is going to be in no man's land for Aleksenko. Let's say king's a g8, queen g6 check, and he's gonna get routed pretty fast. For example, king f8, queen g7, king e8, rook g1 check. Wins the queen with mate for Fabi, and it's really gonna be over. So after this queen h5 move, again, great game by Fabi. Fabi moves up to now tie for the lead with 1.5 out of 2, and he joins Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and yesterday's winners Wang Hao and Jan Nepomniachtchi. So we will check on their games now. So let's check on Jan's game. He drew with Grischuk after e4, e5, and we have another Ruy Lopez, another Berlin, the modern treatment of the Berlin, which has been played many, many times in chess recently. This is all very standard stuff. Takes on d8, knight c3. And theory here says king back to e8. Okay, I'll accept what the theory gods have to say on this, but h3, h5, all probably very well known to both players still at this point. Rook a to d1, bishop e6, knight to g5, rook h6. Again, we are still very much within the confines of theory. Rook f to e1, bishop b4. Again, still has been played many, many times. Vladimir Kramnik has played this line. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave has played this line. Nakamura has played this line. H4, king to h2, and there's the novelty from Jan, but this game is already pretty clearly headed toward a draw. It's not going to be much doing for both sides. Both sides have doubled c-pawns, and this pawn on h4 prevents white from pushing the kingside majority with ease. So not really much happens throughout the rest of the game. Jan pushes a little bit, but Grischuk really does not have a problem. We have a little bit of excitement here with g4 and captures on g3, trying to free up his kingside majority a bit, but Grischuk never in trouble. Maybe probably better for most of this game. Even rook fe3, knight to d8, and from here on it really just peters out to a draw. There's not much that Grischuk can do on the queen side, and he does a very good job of making sure that Jan can't really get anything going on the king side, and after rook captures on d8, the players agreed to a draw because this is an opposite colored bishop's endgame. Jan is going to play bishop captures on d8, and after c6, Grischuk doesn't really have any problems, even if Jan goes after the pawn with bishop b7, just b3, captures, b3, and bishop to d6, and this is just going to be dead drawn. There's really no way for either side to win this, as Jan has control over f5, and Grischuk's king and pawns and bishop are still well placed to counter anything that could happen on the king side. So now let's check out the final game of the day to finish, which was Wang Hao versus Anish Yuri. Wang Hao was pushing for a win for a while here after all of the other games had finished, but wasn't able to do it. And really a necessary result for Yuri after losing to Nepo yesterday. He really needed a draw here to keep himself in the tournament, and he does it. And this was also a good chance for Wang Hao to seize the lead in the tournament, the sole lead after 2 rounds, and put everyone else on his pace. But he couldn't pull it out. So let's check out the game. C4, C5. We have a symmetrical English, and the symmetrical variation of the symmetrical variation of the English. So if you did not know that, then hopefully that added something to your life, but I doubt it did. So again, this is a bit of a different game here, following a newer track for a while. This C captures on D4 had been played a couple of times. Knight B5, D5, trades happen, castles, Knight F6, Bishop F4, castles, and now this Queen to C1 is the novelty here from Wang Hao. He is much lower on time than Yuri, but has a fairly comfortable position as he's going to have pressure on the D file. He has pressure on C7 and pressure on D6. So A6 by Yuri trying to kick the knight away. So knight captures, king H7, rook to D1, and now Wang Hao is a very pleasant position which he can play really for as long as he wants. So he decides to trade the queens, off come the queens, and just maneuvers his forces around. If F captures on G4, rook captures on C7 probably would be an improvement for Yuri because of the doubling of White's majority and the potential for Yuri to double on the C file very soon. So Wang Hao does not go for that. Bishop to A5, bishop to D7, king F2, and Wang Hao starts trying to press the tiny advantage that he has, but doesn't really get too much out of it. Yuri is very good at defense. Obviously, all of these 2,700 super grandmasters are very good at playing chess, but Yuri just does a good job of making sure that Wang Hao doesn't get too much of an edge. Here, Wang Hao is plus 1.2, but Yuri is still well within the confines of a draw. And Yuri continues to play very, very solid chess. Wang Hao wins the pawn on b5, but doesn't really do it super comfortably as Yuri's rooks now get additional activity, and he doesn't have very much problem dealing with the b pawn at all. So Wang Hao seems to have continued to push for a little bit of an edge, but Yuri holds very well. Knight to b6, a very crucial move, blockades the passed pawn on a dark square, which makes it very difficult for Wang Hao to kick this knight away. And even though he's up a pawn in a rook and minor piece ending, it's still very holdable for Yuri, and which he does with a very high amount of precision here. F4, king F6, rook D8, trying to get some activity for Wang Hao, but Yuri says no thank you. And after king F3, the players agreed to a draw as Yuri can just keep checking as long as he wants, and it would take a bit too much for Wang Hao to push this pawn. If he had captured this, he cannot capture the knight there, and Yuri will just continue checking on d2 and e4. So very good defensive technique there from Anish Yuri. Even though Wang Hao managed to pick up the b pawn, it still was not enough for him to be able to convert the ending, so kudos to him for that. Wang Hao is now in the 4-player pack with 1.5 out of 2 points. Him, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Jan Nepomniachtchi, and Fabiano Caruana. All of them will continue to battle it out for the rest of the tournament. And now the daily question for you guys as the viewers is, what will Ding Liren's final score be after the full 14 rounds have finished, because Ding currently on 0 out of 2, having a very bad tournament. Like I said earlier, his performance rating right now is sub 2,000, which is extremely bad. So, to the viewers out there, what do you think that Ding's score will be at the end of the tournament? And do you think he'll be able to turn it back around, get maybe back to 0 instead of -2 where he is right now? So, thank you guys all for watching this episode of the Candidates After Party with AChessB. We will be back at the same time tomorrow to look at the games from round 3, see if Ding Liren did not lose again, and who managed to maybe pull themselves away from the pack. So, thank you, everybody.